All right. We are live. It is Thursday night and it is time for the Woman Who Doesn't Quit series, week 2. Hello, my beautiful sisters. I am so happy to be with you this week. I am so excited about this week's content. I hope that everyone had the opportunity to view the video. Welcome, Sydney. Welcome, Curl. I welcome everyone to the room tonight. Hello, my pastor peeped in here. Hi, Pastor Karen. But I'm so excited to be with you all tonight, and I hope you had an opportunity to view the video on Ruth week 2 as we talk about the woman who doesn't quit. So my sisters, my opening question for you tonight is, are you ready? Are you really ready for God's refinement? Are you really ready to be challenged? Are you really ready to be stretched into some unfamiliar places? Because what we understand, hi mama, hi pastor, what we understand is that a woman that doesn't quit has been stretched. She's being stretched in some areas that are quite unfamiliar to her, and she's being stretched in some places that looked one way but feel an entirely different way as we're going in. And so what we understand about Ruth as we laid the foundation a week ago is that she made the decision after she lost her husband to leave everything she knew as a Moabite woman to go with her mother-in-law, Naomi. So we understand that she left everything she knew to go to a place of unfamiliarity. And my sisters, tonight I want you to understand is that when God is refining us, when God is shaping us and molding us, he has to move us sometimes from some places of comfort, because comfort's easy. We can do it with our eyes closed. We don't have to really think about it much. We don't have to give it much initiative. But when we have to be stretched and we have to be refined back to that place of purity, I want you to understand what refinement means. I'm going to give you the definition of refinement. So first of all, refinement is a noun. Refining is a verb. So refinement means or is the process of taking something back to its purest state. So when we take something back to its purest state, we go back to the beginning, right? We go back to where we started from, where things looked a little bit more clearer. There were no imperfections or no impurities. We weren't tainted. We weren't shaped or molded by someone else's beliefs or theologies. But when we are refined according to God, we are refined back to how He created us. So it's so important to understand that when God wants to get us to His purpose, His ordained purpose, and we're going to talk about His ordained purpose and the presupposed purpose a little while later. But I want you to understand, my sisters, is that getting to that place of purpose in God means God has to refine us. We can't go into newness with some old things and some old baggage, because there's just no room. There's no room for those things to fit and for us to still be productive and prosperous and successful. But my sisters, refinement cost us some things. Refinement means we have to be willing to walk away from some things. We have to be willing to walk towards some things. We have to be willing to end some relationships. We have to be willing to end some going to some places and hanging out with some people. We just have to be willing to stay committed to a why that's so much bigger than what we can see sometimes. And my sisters, I'm coming to you from a place of knowing and being in that place where I got to trust God blind. I got to trust Him, not knowing for sure that it's going to be what it looks like, or even how I know He gave it to me. But I got to go through this process of refinement, and I promise you, I'm going through it with you. So we know that Ruth moved and she went to this unfamiliar place, and this place was a place of refinement for her. And Ruth had no idea that that's what God was doing as He was shifting her. Remember, she told Naomi, your God will be my God. And as I read that text and kind of meditated over, I had to wonder, was the God that Ruth was serving, was it different from the God that she was going to meet in Bethlehem? Was this a God that she was going to meet in Bethlehem that was going to truly show her who she is and who she was and who created her? Was it not the same God of the Moabites? that she was serving under, that she was living under. And my sisters, let's just be real. Everybody's God is not the same. Everybody's God doesn't hold to the same truths that you or I may believe in. Everybody's God doesn't want the same things for them. But when you read that text, you got to wonder, what God was she serving, that now she was moving to this place where she was endorsing that this is going to be my God. And whatever that meant for her, she was down for it. She was open for it. So my sisters, are you open for what God has for you? No matter what that may mean right now, are you open for what God has for you? Because to get to purpose means we have to be open for what God needs to do in and through us. Even when it's uncomfortable, there's some painstakingly places that we're going to go through. There's some isolation places that we're going to go through and to get to what God has, but to stay the course. Sometimes meaning I'm going to be alone. It means sometimes we're going to be in some valley seasons, but that's how we stay the course. That's how we don't quit. Because God has to move us back so that we can hear him so much more clearly, so that we can follow him without distractions and without looking at other people's signs and other people's lives and wondering, why does my life not look like that? Or God, did I miss you because I thought that's what you said I was going to have? And we get that kind of convoluted in the midst of things. But Ruth was clear about where she was going, even though she didn't know where she was going. You follow me? Ruth had no idea what God was setting her up for. Ruth had no idea that her yes was going to set her up, that she would be in the lineage of the Messiah. She had no idea that her yes was going to set generations up. She had no idea, my sisters, that her yes was going to set me and you up. She had no idea that her yes would further impact generations to come. She had no idea that tonight we'd be looking at the pages of her life and saying, my God, Ruth, I want that commitment. I want that connection. I want that faith. I want that steadfast. God, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm going to follow you anyway. I'm going to do what you say. When you say do it, I'm going to do it how you say do it. I'm going to do it with who you say do it with. But God, I'm going to do it. She had no idea that that's where her life would lead her as she went through her refining process. And my sisters, tonight I want to remind you that your yes is somebody else's future. Somebody else is waiting on your yes, and somebody else is waiting on you to say, I'm not going to quit no matter how it feels. I'm not going to quit. And my supervisor has ticked me off. I'm not going to quit even though I'm tired of being in this cubby and there doesn't feel like there's no promotion. I'm not going to quit even though it feels like no one supports me. I'm not going to quit even though it feels like this is a lonely place and it's a painful place. I'm not going to quit even though it doesn't seem to add out or map out. I'm not going to quit. Why? Somebody's yes. Somebody is waiting on your yes. Somebody needs your yes, because your yes means, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So my sisters, our yes is everything. Our yes is everything to the next sister, because you never know who's looking at your life and saying, I don't know how she's doing it, and I don't know which strength she's doing it in, but Lord, I'm so grateful that she's doing it, because now I can just line up and link up with her and follow her footsteps, because she's already mapped out a blueprint. Ruth already mapped out a blueprint. She showed us what it meant to be refined by God. The first thing she did was show up in a land that was, the land was famine at the time that they showed up. It was a difficult season in Bethlehem, but she showed up at a time and the favor of God was upon her. Why? Because she said yes to God. So the favor of God was upon her where no one else had a job. Ruth had a job. Well, she made friends easily. God's favor rested upon her. It rested upon her yes. So her refinement meant she lost some things only to gain some things. She gained God's best, my sisters. And I want to say to you tonight that even what you think you're holding on to, that this is all I'll have, and if I let it go, I don't know that I'll have more. I don't know that it's really going to manifest the way that you're telling me it's going to manifest, Dr. Gia, because I just don't know. But I want to tell you is that if you hold on to all that you have right now and you never release it, you never trust God to do big and to be great in your life, that's all you'll ever have. I know what it's like to be hungry, and I know what it's like to be full, and I prefer to be full. I prefer to have God's best. And when we have God's best, we hunger for nothing. We lack nothing. We have no voids. There's nothing missing. God's not going to lead us anywhere that he's not going to see us through. The promises of God are so much greater than what we could ever even imagine for ourselves. So I understand about this woman that doesn't quit, because sometimes we want to quit. We want to quit, but this woman that doesn't quit understands about enduring the process of refinement. She understands that we must stay committed to the process. Refinement means committed. It means I'm committed to being broken so that I can be built. I'm committed to allowing God to shave some things off so that I can have the best of him. And no, that shaving process doesn't always feel great, because we feel like we're losing something so much greater, that we feel like that we've lost some things in the process. We feel vulnerable. We feel vulnerable. God knows all about us. We're vulnerable before him. But even more so, those vulnerabilities that we have to put before one another. We have to be willing to say, you know what, here I am. This is who I am, but I'm okay with who I am because I know God's got my back in this. I'm okay with where I'm walking right now, because even though it seems to be a little bit of a delicate situation and a delicate glass right here, I'm okay because I know God's got my back. So we got to sometimes step out on those places, my sisters, and understand God's got our back. We have to step out on those places trusting that another sister has our back. Some of us have been hurt so bad that we don't trust anybody. We don't trust anybody to be in our space and to be authentic to be in our space. We're giving everybody the side eye because we don't know really, why are you in my space? Why are you going where I'm going? Why is my God becoming your God? But my sisters, we got to trust somebody some of the time. We got to seek God on who's supposed to be in our sphere of influence, who's supposed to be in our space, who's supposed to be in this process of refinement, because everybody can't go to the next season with you. Orpha made her decision. She was going on. She was going back to her homeland. She wasn't going to the next season of Naomi and Ruth's life. Everybody can't go to your next level. Everybody can't go to your next season. And you have to be okay with that refining as God is pulling off some things and God is adding some things. Everybody's not meant to be a lifer. Everybody's not meant to be a long-term friend, but there are some people, there are some sisters that you're going to meet along the way that's going to push you right through that place of refinement only to get to the next level of purpose in God. But we got to be willing to go through that. We got to be willing to do that and be okay with that, knowing that there's nothing that another individual can take from you, because what God has for you is for you. What God has for me is for me. And I'm not hating on nobody, and I don't want nobody hating on me, because we are greater. We are greater together, and we are great in our own right, because we are made by an amazing God. We're made by a God that has given each of us wonderful and amazing gifts, talents, and abilities. So my sisters, we have to understand that Ruth was in a vulnerable place as she allowed God to refine her. She was in a vulnerable place where she thought, I'm just going to help my mother-in-law. I don't have any hidden agendas. I'm just going to show up for her. But my sisters, I will tell you, the woman who doesn't quit understands that sometimes, even though you think you're showing up for someone else, you're really showing up for you. You're really saying, you know what, I got her, but I got to do this for me. I got to prove to myself that I'm stronger than what I think I am. I got to prove to myself that I'm wiser than what I think I am. I got to prove to myself that I done got over some pain points of some things of insecurities and lack of self-esteem and lack of self-love, and that I can't trust anybody, or I can't be with another woman and we get along and we fellowship and we rejoice and celebrate one another. Sometimes showing up for another shows up for you. You're showing yourself that you're bigger than that. You're showing yourself that no longer am I going to live in that past stuff because it can't fit into my present, nor can I carry it into my future. But sometimes you just got to show up. You got to just show up. So Ruth showed up for Naomi, so she thought. But she was showing up for not just Naomi, but she was showing up to be present in a future that she had no idea that God was shaping and molding right before her eyes. She had no idea that she was going to meet a man named Boaz. She had no idea that the favor was going to rest upon her as he watched her work in the fields. Different already. It was something different about Ruth that he had already gleaned just from the first encounter. What does your aura say about you, my sisters? What are others gleaning from just by looking at you or having the first encounter? Can they see the favor of God already on you? Do they see the woman who's made up her mind that she's not going to quit no matter what? No matter how many people show up, no matter how many people are in the room with you, the fact that you showed up in the room, the fact that you showed up here tonight says, you know what? You, yourself, and God are enough. Are you that woman that's saying that about herself? Because that's the woman that doesn't quit. She understands that sometimes it's going to be a group, but sometimes it's just going to be her. She understands that sometimes the road that she must travel won't always be easy, but that road is worth it to get to the expected end that was already promised. That woman that doesn't quit understands that, no, I may not like that I got to stay in this place where nobody speaks to me in the morning, or nobody even greets me, or I'm shunned because of my beliefs, or I'm shunned because of how I look. God, why do you still have me in this place? But my sisters, I want to tell you this tonight. God hasn't shifted you from some places because he's refining you in those places. Those places are where God is sharpening you. Those are the places where God is pruning you. And those are the very places where God says, I got to get that thing out of her right here because I can't have her take it over there. So there was some things that have to be refined, even though we want to move, we want to change, we want to shift, we want out. God says, it's not time. It's not time. It's not time. So we got to stay put. We got to stay put and let God do his work. We got to stay put and let God do the refining process. He does it so much better. He's so much good at shaving off those things that we don't need because we want to be hoarders and hold on to everything, including our pain, including missing purpose, including holding on to relationships that we know are not fruitful and are not multiplying, including holding on to people, places, and things that we aren't meant to be in, and we know it because they don't make us feel good, holding on to things that we're basing our happiness on and not understanding that happiness is circumstantial and conditional, but God's joy is everlasting and it sustains and it maintains because it rests in him. So God's not shifting you from some places right now because it's not your time. It's not time to move from those places because God needs you to stay committed to the process of being refined. God says, I need you to stay committed to the process of allowing me to purify you back to how I made you, to how I know how I see you, because there's a different view of what you see and what others see and what God sees. So when we allow God to refine us, we go back to the basics. We go back to being who he says we are. We go back to a love affair with him that says, God, I don't know how I was missing this, but this is good right here. So we allow God to be God. You know, Ruth had nothing to do but allow God to be God. God, I'm in unfamiliar territory. I don't have any expectations other than I'm trusting my mother-in-law because this is her home, but I'm also trusting the foreigners of this land. And God, all I have is you. All I have is you. So whatever you need to do, I just feel like Ruth's actions spoke her yes. It spoke her yes before God. The woman who doesn't quit, she didn't quit, even when it probably got a little bit intimidating, even when it kind of felt like this is a little bit hard, God. She didn't quit. She didn't quit because the woman that doesn't quit understands that you have to endure. You have to endure, and you have to understand that you don't need the validation of someone else to validate who God already says you are. The woman who doesn't quit understands that even though I've been removed from everything that I know, everything that I believe in, everything that felt right, that she doesn't have to be validated by someone else. She doesn't have to be who others say she has to be. She doesn't have to do what others say she has to do, but she understands that her validation comes in lining up with who God says she is. So that's the woman who doesn't quit. She has a whole different perspective about what that means to be validated, about what that means to be accepted. The woman that doesn't quit stays on her grind. She keeps going and moving forward, even in the midst of a changing environment, even though some people are going to look at you strange and say, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Is that really what God told you to do? I don't think that's what God told you to do. Even when it looks crazy to somebody else, the woman who doesn't quit is going to step out. She's going to step out and she's going to do it even when it looks crazy. Do I have any of my sisters in the room tonight that says, you know what? I'm going to be that woman that doesn't quit and have crazy faith. I'm going to step out even when it looks crazy. If that's you, just say that to me. I'm going to step out on crazy, because every crazy don't need fixing, because when you stepping out crazy for God, it's a whole different level. Everybody can't handle that crazy. Anybody crazy for Jesus tonight? Anybody say, God, I'm just going to step out and be crazy for you. It may not line up with everybody else, and everybody else may not get it. Girl, why you leaving to go to this place you don't know? Why you leaving to go to this building that doesn't even look like you belong there, you fit, or it's going to work out? Why are you moving? Do you understand that that looks crazy? But my sisters, sometimes you got to look crazy. Sometimes you got to be willing to look crazy, to not quit, to not abort your purpose, to not abort the process, to not abort what God needs to do on the inside of you, so that on the outside, it begins to reflect everything that he purged on the inside of you. Sometimes we just got to look crazy and be okay with it. Because if God has spoken it, if he's already given you that aha, if he's already given you that vision of where you're going, no, it's not going to make sense to everybody. It's not even going to make sense to you sometimes. Sometimes when God's speaking, he's doing things, I'm like, God, that doesn't even make sense for me to do that. But you know what? If you said it, I trust that you're going to do it, because I know I can't do it. Well, we're just not that smart, my sisters. We're just not that smart. When God speaks, we're not that smart to analyze his thoughts. We're not that smart to say, God, did you really mean that? Because that doesn't really, God's ways aren't our ways. He doesn't think like we do. He doesn't feel like we do. He's a bold and amazing God, and he wants us to be just as bold. What Ruth did was bold. I mean, she picked up her whole life, and walked away to something so unfamiliar. So my sisters, I want to share two critical points with you tonight about refinement and risk. You can't be refined and not be willing to take some risk. Because in that process of refinement, you know, as some things are being changed and some things are being shifted, that means we got to step into some new things, and that can be risky. Because we don't always know what's going to be on the other side. We're praying and we're believing, but sometimes we don't know what's going to be on the other side. We don't know who's going to meet us on the other side. We don't know if we know what God said. We know what God promises, and we know that what he showed up the last time, he wowed us. But every time there's a new place that we got to step on, that vulnerability goes before. The human nature in us goes before. But you can't be refined and walk into your ordained purpose and not your presupposed purpose. And let me tell you what a presupposed purpose is. A presupposed purpose is the one that you created for yourself. It's the one that you said you're supposed to do. It's the one that I said I'm supposed to do, but it's so much more work when we make up who we think we're supposed to be, what we think we're supposed to be doing, doesn't line up with what God said. Doesn't line up with God said, you know what? No, that's what I created you to do. That's what I created you to put your hands to work. And that's what I'm going to put my blessing on. That's what the ordained purpose is. But the presupposed purpose can get us caught up, my sisters, because it keeps us looking at what we think things should look like. It keeps us thinking about how we feel, and we make emotional decisions and not intellectual decisions. We make decisions based on how we feel today and maybe how we feel tomorrow, and whether or not somebody called us back or didn't text us back, or whether or not we had a good day or a bad day, or whether or not our relationship was right today, or the sun was shining on the east or the west. We base all these decisions on what we're going to walk out on any given day. But when you're walking into God's ordained purpose, all you know is that, God, all I have is what you promised. All I have is that I'm waiting to hear your instructions from 1 to 10, and I want to follow them, God. I don't want to miss them, because in my presupposed purpose, it can be a little iffy. It can be a little tactical sometimes and tacky based on my feelings. But I understand that the ordained purpose, you already have written that. You have already written that before you formed me in my mama's belly. It was already there. So it's not based on this emotional turmoil of things. It's not based on whether or not God feels great today or feels like a nut today, or if he feels like a bowl of cereal with Cheerios. It's based on the fact that he's God and he already wrote it. So my sisters, that's where we got to be heading towards, is the woman that doesn't quit. We got to be heading towards the ordained purpose. Not the purpose that's based on how we feel today. Not the purpose that says I got to kickstart myself to make sure I still want to do it. But the purpose that says, God, I'm going to do it when I feel good. I'm going to do it when I don't feel good. I'm going to do it when I feel vulnerable. I'm going to do it when I feel like I'm walking into this unfamiliar place of uncertainty. I'm going to do it when I feel like everybody is shunning me and talking about me. I'm going to do it when it looks like there's 10 of us or there's 1,000 of us. God, I'm going to do it when the numbers don't add up in the bank account, because God, I know that you are the God of provision. I'm going to do it. That's what the ordained purpose says. That's what the refining woman that doesn't quit says. She shows up. She shows up to be present for her. She shows up to say, you know what? What's the alternative? What was the alternative for Ruth? To stay back in Moabite, the land where there were adultery, they had no values, no morals, no sense of anything. Was that the alternative? Or was the alternative to show up to an ordained purpose that you have no idea that God's setting you up to be in the lineage of the Messiah? Or sisters, what's the choice? What's the alternative? What's the alternative to what God is saying to you? Is it better than the pain you're still carrying? Is it better than the no's you keep getting because you keep trying it your way? Is it better than keep knocking your head up against the same wall over and over and over again, expecting something to be different? Or are you ready to say, God, I got this and I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn wherever I am upside downwards, because God, you told me I could. God, you told me I could. You told me that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. God told us that. He wrote it in his word. And we got to own it, and we got to make it personal. You got to put your name in the written word and own it like it's yours. Why? Because that's daddy talking to his daughters. So Ruth had no alternative. It's, I'm going to show up and be committed to this process, or I'm going to be committed to somebody else's who doesn't care about whether I win or lose. There was no guarantee of what was going to become of if Ruth would have stayed and went back to her home. But one thing's for certain is that Naomi was going to let her go with her, but she wasn't going to see her fail. Naomi had her own wallows and was wallowing in her own sorrow and pity and already penalizing herself before God even had a chance to show up. But she wasn't going to see Ruth lose. She wasn't going to see Ruth make this sacrifice and not win. Who's in your space that says, I'm not going to have my sister show up and not win? My sister's Dr. Just not going to have you show up and not win, because I know we can do it. Even when we think we can't, even when we think we don't have the capacity, guess what? We don't, but God does. So who's in your space that's cheering you on to say, girl, you got this? If it's your thought or your dream to be an entrepreneur, girl, you got this. Just step. That's the woman that doesn't quit. She just steps. And God will meet her. You step with a vision. You step with a purpose. You step intentionally. But I promise you, if you step, God's going to meet you in the next one. So Naomi was there. She wasn't going to see Ruth fail. She wasn't going to see her fall because she did something that she didn't have to do. Ruth didn't have to go with Naomi. She didn't have to sacrifice. Pretty much we can gather from the text that Ruth wasn't that old. So she had her whole life ahead of her. But she decided that I'm going to follow my mother-in-law. There's something to be said for that. That's something to be said for a woman that says, you know what? There's something there that I need to follow. There's some wisdom there that I need to hold on, that I need to latch onto. She has some things to pour into me that I need to go to this place from immaturity to maturity. So we have to understand, my sisters, that refinement means we're going to take some risk. It means we can't go where we have not walked. We cannot go all the time where we feel comfortable, and we can't run from every situation. We're going to have to face some things smack dead in the face, and we're going to have to deal with them. But what doesn't kill us will make us stronger. What doesn't kill us will make us stronger. So those things that we haven't wanted to face, those things that we haven't wanted to let go of, those things that we keep thinking we need to be better, to be greater, I will tell you, man is not the ordainer of your future, but God is. He will complete us in ways that man never can. He will refine us in ways that man never can. And his refinement means that when we show up, that when I show up to the room, I'm better for you. I'm the best version of myself. Why? Because God's refined me. God's refined me. And when you show up in that place from being refined, now you're ready to move to the next level. Now you're ready to embrace and be bold. Now you're ready to say, no longer am I going to be defined by others, but I'm going to keep on embracing and let God's definition of this woman that doesn't quit show up. She's going to walk into the room and command the room. She's going to walk into this place of newness, and be okay with who she is. So important to note that Ruth took a risk. She took a risk on her place of refinement. The first thing was she went with Naomi, not knowing the what or the how. She seemed to do that often, because the next risk she took was that she went to Boaz. She went to Boaz. The book of Ruth tells us that she went to his room and she was at his feet. And when he woke to say, "Who are you?" And she introduced who she was to him. She went to Boaz, not knowing what his response was going to be, not knowing what his reaction was going to be, but she went to him with boldness. She went to him under the advisement under Naomi. So my sisters, I want you to say, I got to make sure I have a Naomi in my space. I got to make sure I have a Naomi in my space, because Naomi had already seen what that was about to be, what that was about to set Ruth up for. Ruth didn't know up front, but Naomi did. I need a Naomi in my space. So she went to this man, not knowing if he was going to reject or receive her. But she went with the boldness, saying, I'm Ruth, here I am. But she didn't compromise herself. She didn't compromise her integrity. She didn't sacrifice who she was. She went to him, introduced herself. She said, we're close relatives, and I need you to make concession for me. And then he said to her, pretty much, this is me paraphrasing, I admire you for the integrity of a woman that you are. I admire your virtue. I admire your integrity. I've never seen you compromise yourself the way some of the others in the field. You do your work and you do it well. You show up and you do what you're supposed to do. You show up and you show out, and you never sell us short. She was a woman that doesn't quit. The woman that doesn't quit, she's the woman of integrity. She's a woman of virtue. She's a woman that shows up and handles her business. She's a woman that doesn't compromise herself so that others can feel comfortable. She's a woman that understands that, I have a lot more to give than just what the outside looks like. I have a lot more on the inside to pour out. My beauty's not just superficial. She's a woman that understands that I'm going to stand my course. I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to stand on this post until God tells me move. She understands that she's going to lose some things to gain some things, but she gains God's best. Can we ever truly appreciate what God has for us if we just keep holding on to all that we have, all that we think that we possess or will ever possess or are worthy enough to possess? I dare you to open your arms and let God in. I dare you to open your arms and let him show you his best. She understood that staying the course of being refined meant that she would graduate from a presupposed purpose to an ordained purpose. So this woman that doesn't quit, and our dear sister Ruth, we see this process of refinement where God was shifting her from a space that she thought, I'm just following my mother-in-law. She had no idea what God was setting her up for in the process. As he shaped some things and molded some things and pulled back some layers and had her grow up in her big girl shoes real quick. as he was showing her the better version of who she was in him. A woman that doesn't quit. Is that you, my sister? Can God shape you the way he needs to? Can God refine you to get to that place of purity in him? My sisters, no, it's not always easy. I will tell you, some days I want to quit. Some days I'm like, God, this is too much. But then I'm reminded, Psalm 91 tells us that even if I stumble, that the angels will catch me. That the angels will catch me. That's their job, to keep us from falling. So even when I want to quit, even when I feel like, God, even all my efforts have been insufficient and inadequate, I'm reminded that the angels will catch me if I stumble. And they'll do the same for you, my sisters. So my sisters, I leave you with this thought tonight. Allow God to refine you. If we think about that process of refining, sugar's refined to a pure grain, gold's refined to its purest state, and all those things come out beautiful so that they can create the most purest element of what they are at their core. Let God refine you to redefine you. Let God refine you so that he can show you the greatest version of who you are and who you will ever come to be. Not defined by your circumstances, not defined by what you've been through, because as long as we live, we're going to go through something. And not defined by who's in your space, but defined by the living God who created each and every one of us so fearfully and wonderfully. So my sisters, it has been an amazing time with you tonight. I've enjoyed pouring into you from the place of refinement. We are all on this journey to becoming refined. I'm so grateful that God even thinks enough of us to continue to refine us and shape us and mold us. God, I thank you that you even still want to do that for us, that you still care enough to want us to be the best. So my sisters, I pray that this blessed you tonight. I pray that you'll look back and see and reflect upon what I said to you about Ruth. She had a choice, but she chose God's choice. She chose God's way to be redefined, refined on the route to purpose. So my sisters, until we meet next week, in all things, I wish you the best. I wish you the best at everything that God has for you. And I pray above all things that on as you purpose to change, you'll change on purpose. God bless you. I love you.